Hello, and thanks again for joining us for another Fathom Live. I'm your host, Jeff Sturtz. This is a live stream show dedicated to giving you tips and insights from experts in and around the real estate industry. Maybe this is your first time joining. If not, or if it is, regardless, start commenting, letting us know where you are from in the Facebook or YouTube comments, and that will automatically enter you into our contest. I'll talk about that in just a moment. Well, let's talk about it now, and then we'll pick last week's winner. So you can win one of 4 prizes in our weekly giveaway contest. You can get a year free, $200 worth of GoSocial lead service, a single OnTarget transaction if they are in your area, a yard sign package up to a $200 value, as well as a photo listing package up to a $200 value. So if your name is chosen, then you get to pick which one of those prizes you will win. So let's take a look at last week's winner here with our name spinner. Here we go. It's still loading. And 3, 2, 1. There it is. It's a spinning, folks. Let's see who wins. We have Greg Perkins. Greg Perkins, you are the winner. So congratulations. Greg will be reaching out to you for that prize. Also, our guest today, Keith Campbell, won the prize last week, and he said he wants to give it away to a new agent. So we'll have to figure out a way how to do that. But be sure to comment in the notes below, because especially if you are a new agent, because you might be one of those winners next week when we pick that. So thanks, Keith, for that. Before we get into our interview with Keith, however, the good people at GoSocial Agent are our sponsors today, and they offer affordable and effective social media marketing solutions to help you grow your business, including social media account setup, automated postings, agent-branded articles, buyer and seller handbooks, and Facebook ad campaigns. So they get you set up, looking good, and they help you grow your online presence and even get some leads with some of the services that they offer. So go to GoSocialAgent.com to get started and to learn more. Again, our guest today is Keith Campbell. Keith, thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
Keith is hailing from San Antonio, where he says it's very hot, and that's just Texas life. We had a very good spring in Texas, and things have we've been repaid with our heat here the last few weeks. Keith is retired Army, and he also, after which, tried out for the Dallas Cowboys. Tell us a little bit about that.
Not retired, Army veteran. My mistake there.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I should have corrected that.
Army veteran, excuse me.
Army veteran. The Cowboys thing sounds a little more glamorous than it really was. It was during the strike year, '87. So they had some tryouts at Texas Stadium for, quote, scab players. And I found out I'm not even good enough to be a scab player. So, but I will tell you this. So there were some amazing athletes there, and they didn't make it either. So I don't feel so bad.
There you go. So nobody did. None of the walk-ons made it that year.
I think around 250, 300 guys tried, and none of them made it.
There you go. So you can
there were some great athletes there. So, but I was one of them. But
very good. Well, football season is kicking off here again, and go Pack Go. Okay, I'm going to get a lot of flack for saying that, but
man, that's not cool.
No, it is great. So if you are watching the show and you want to ask Keith questions during our live stream, feel free to do that either in the Facebook or YouTube comments. We'll be monitoring that. That way, if you have things that you want to interact, especially as it relates to inspections, where Keith's expertise is in, be sure to throw those out. So I want to start off with a fun one here. What's the craziest thing, or one of the craziest things you've ever found during an inspection, or maybe you've got more than one?
There's been a few. Probably the one that got my attention the most was a stack of $100 bills wrapped in plastic under a vanity sink. And
Wow.
luckily I wasn't tempted to take it because as I looked around the house, I realized these are probably drug dealers. So I don't want them coming hunting me down. So I had a lady one time leave an entire uh, like lunch in the oven, and it was smoking and burning by the time I realized it was going on. And you name it. Somebody left an eyeball on a countertop, vanity countertop. I mean, like a real eyeball, not like flesh, but like I'm not sure what you call them, but
Yeah,
you
fake eye
know,
that you would
yeah,
wear. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Which I walked in and I didn't notice at first. I've been over looking under the counter and I looked up and it was right in my face. I mean, 6 inches away, freaked me out just a little bit. But yeah, lots of drugs. Honestly, lots of people hide them in electrical outlets and sub panel boxes and stuff like that.
Didn't
Kind of
think about the
crazy.
inspector coming.
No, not
No.
at all.
So, as it relates to being a realtor, interacting with inspectors, here's a big controversial one. Maybe it's not controversial. Should a buyer's agent be at the property during an inspection, and why or why not?
In my opinion, absolutely. I was a home inspector for 7 years before I became a realtor, and I can tell you, had I been a home inspector who was nosy or a know-it-all or wanted to interfere in something, it'd be really easy to mislead people. Or not that I don't think a lot of inspectors do that, but a lot of them want to show you how smart they are. Not a lot of them. Some want to show you how smart they are, and they can create problems for you. I would just say this: you've worked hard to land this client. You've worked hard to put a deal under contract. Why would you hand over control of a deal, of the situation, to somebody you don't really know that well, who doesn't know the nuances of the contract, doesn't know the nuances of the deal, can say something that can scare or frighten your clients or make them upset, and now you may have something in limbo that could have been avoided. And it's an opportunity, quite honestly, to learn how to be an expert about houses. I don't think every realtor should be a home inspector or take the classes or whatever, but I think they should be experts at their craft. And we sell houses,
Right.
we sell land, we sell commercial buildings. So we have to have a pretty basic understanding of houses, and it's a great opportunity to learn. You learn from people who know things, and you also learn from people who don't. You learn not what to do, not what to say. So I think it's a great opportunity to grow your craft, become an expert, and better serve your clients, and control your deal.
So during that inspection, then, is the realtor to follow that inspector around the house, watching him do everything? I mean, are they there the whole time, or what would you recommend? And by the way, for our viewers, Keith is not only an inspector; he's a realtor, and so has experience on both sides. So what should that look like?
Well, when I was inspecting, and even now as a realtor, I always tell my clients, let's get there about an hour before it's over. I'll bring a tape measure. Hey, measure windows, doors, fridge openings. Look at the house a little closer, because a lot of times you're putting a house under contract after looking at it for less than 30, 45 minutes, maybe an hour. It's another opportunity to take another glance at the house. Here in Texas, we have what's called an option period, usually negotiated. So we have that opportunity to get out of the deal if we find something that's really shocking or a big expense or a deal killer, as we call them.
Right.
I personally, as an inspector, and I tell my buyer clients this when I'm representing them, don't follow them around. You will distract them and they will miss something. I've had it happen as an inspector. We'll get into this a little later, but I have a vetted list of inspectors that I give to my clients, along with the link to Trex inspectors. And I tell them these guys have been vetted, and I trust them. They're experienced. They have a lot of inspections under their belt. I know how they communicate with my clients. I know they're not going to use alarmist language or scare them. What you want is let them do their job. Then at the end, you want an inspector that's going to teach you a little bit and walk you around the house, spend 30 minutes or whatever, highlighting issues that concern them, answering questions about maintenance, whatnot. That's kind of the format. You want to get there near the last hour, the last 30 minutes, and spend some time letting them explain things to you. And as a realtor, as a buyer's agent, it's a great opportunity to learn. And, when they have the tape measure and you're in there with them that last hour, you as a realtor should be taking some notes. You should be, whether it's physically or mentally, saying, here's some things I want to ask the inspector if my clients don't bring it up.
Gotcha.
It's a great way to.
Are there any things in particular that, at the end of inspection, I should be ready to interact with the inspector on as a realtor?
Yeah, I would, as a realtor, I want to know a lot about the foundation. I want to know a lot about the big systems, the HVAC, heating and cooling, water heater, maybe appliances, the roof. I want to know about, how much insulation's in the attic. I want to know my clients aren't buying a house that's going to cost them $600, $800 a month in utilities because there's no insulation, There's no radiant barrier, there's poor ventilation, whatever the situation may be. Or if it's a foundation, Texas has very expansive soil for the most part. So houses are going to move. Just because you have cracks doesn't mean you necessarily have foundation problems.
Right. So you mentioned this, at least alluded to it already here. You ever get in situations where the inspector is interacting with your client, and of course, you being an inspector yourself and a realtor, you kind of have the inside scoop a little bit on this, but where they're interacting with your clients in a way that is not helpful for you as a realtor?
Well, even more important than not helpful for me is not healthy for my clients. I will intercede in a heartbeat. I've had clients hire inspectors that I don't know. I have no relationship with them, and I don't tell them, oh, by the way, I'm also a home inspector, and probably far more experienced than you are in most cases.
Right.
I keep my mouth shut. I listen. And if they say something that is detrimental or not accurate or misleading, I will step in a moment. And every realtor should do this. But you can't do that if you don't have some knowledge of houses and some basic understanding. If you're a realtor and you sell 100 houses in, let's just say 10 years, 10 a year, after 10 years, you're going to have an exceptional knowledge of how the process is, what they're looking for. Remember, this is not exhaustive. It's an overview.
So, you get in a situation where the inspector is using, a lot of scare kind of language, and wait a minute, this isn't as big a deal as he's making it, and this is now going to freak out my clients, and they really do have a good house here, but he's making it sound like the world's falling in. That's the kind of thing you're talking about, or would be something different?
Yeah, what I do is what I call the mirror technique. My wife's going to laugh when she hears this on video, but it's a negotiating tool, right? The mirror. When somebody says something ridiculous, you say it back to them as a question, and they're like, "Oh, well, yeah, that does sound kind of dumb."
Well, no, I'm not saying that, like that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah, so, that's the response you're looking for.
So they say, if they say, "Oh, well, this house not having arc fault circuit interrupters, AFCIs, they just came into code or standards in 2009."
Right.
They're not required on a house before 2009. If they make an issue of that, I'm going to say, so you're telling us, not just me, but my clients as well, that this is mandatory? And that immediately sends an alarm to them. No, it's not mandatory. I need to rephrase that.
Okay, so now we know how serious this really is.
Right. So I kind of mirror them. I don't say, oh, you're wrong. We can get to that, but that's usually later. I'm not going to do that in front of my clients because that makes for a bad situation.
Right.
I'll say, oh, we'll wait for the report, and then I'll contact them and say, hey, look, just so you know, I've done 3,000 of these. I'm a little concerned with what you said here.
Right.
And it's only happened a handful of times in 150 houses that we've sold. So it's pretty rare.
How should somebody go about hiring an inspector? And I'll let you take it away as long as you want, but I'll also mention to our viewers, if you go onto our website page where we have our live show and Keith's episode here, he actually has provided a couple of very, very helpful handouts that's going to relate to some of this stuff. But what kind of questions should I be asking as I'm looking for an inspector?
Let me say something about that document. Did y'all put it in there as a Word file?
Yes, yeah, it's a Word file. Mm-hmm.
Anybody that wants to use that document is welcome to take it, change the logos to theirs. It's all Trek based stuff, and then there's some of my own personal proprietary, but anybody's welcome to use it.
Thank you.
Bottom line is that you want somebody who has experience. Make sure they're a professional licensed inspector. In Texas, now every state's different. Texas has some of the most stringent home inspector standards and education and training and tests to pass. So you have apprentice, you have real estate, and you have professional. You want a professional. An apprentice or a real estate inspector have to be sponsored by a professional inspector. Kind of like real estate agents have to be sponsored by a broker. You want somebody who has a lot of experience, the maximum education. If they have some additional certifications, ASHI, NASHI, whatever, some of these organizations, it's going to help. You want somebody who is not going to rush you. Who you don't want somebody who's going to say, "Oh, you don't need to show up." Those are red flags. Do not hire them. Big time. I will tell you a quick story. Right after me and my wife both got our license within a few months of each other, and she had a really nice house she put under contract for some out of state buyers, and we hadn't really worked out the process of how do we help our clients hire a home inspector yet. So we just gave him a list, quite a few names, and he ended up hiring the worst inspector we've ever met in our lives.
Oh no.
He showed up half an hour late. We're there representing our clients because the client's out of state. And he says, "Hey, y'all can go ahead and go home. I won't tell your clients you weren't here." And we're like, no, we won't be doing that. But we did say we're going to grab something to eat, and we'll come back at the end. We were gone an hour. The house was 3,500 square foot, swimming pool, jacuzzi. I mean, for me, this is a 3.5 hour inspection. Came back in an hour and a half. He's gone. We get the report, hardly any pictures, no good explanations of what he's identifying as deficiencies. So you want people who take pictures. We'll talk about this, I think, a little later, but don't let report size fool you. Big pictures, lots of pictures make reports big. Doesn't mean it's a bad house. Don't get caught up in the number of pages. But you want somebody who's not only going to tell you what's wrong, but it's going to throw some good home maintenance tips in as they're walking the house with you. Oh, you have stucco siding. You have expansion joints, so you don't need to caulk those because they're aluminum or metal or whatever. But let's say you have brick and there's weep holes, or there's an expansion joint where, two bricks come together and it needs to have caulking that's got some elasticity. So as the foundation moves a little bit, it doesn't break and allow water to weep through or inside of the wall cavity. You want somebody that's going to give you some education. You're paying good money. I mean, and that's another thing. Cheap is not always good. And expensive is not always good. I've seen inspectors that charge a lot that do a horrible job, and I've seen the opposite. So don't just go by that. Ask for a sample report. If they won't send you a sample report, don't hire them. If they won't give you 5 names of of clients they've inspected with phone numbers in the last 3 months, 2 months, don't hire them. You're buying probably the most expensive asset in your life. Spend a little money, do a little research. It's still a little bit of a buyer's market, so it's a seller's market, so it's kind of hard to get that longer option period, right. Or in other states they call it a due diligence period. But give yourself enough time to hire an inspector and get the right one, because it can either be a blessing or a nightmare.
So how do I then, maybe as a realtor, I've worked with a couple of inspectors in the past, or one in particular that I just really find does really good work, but I don't want to, because for ethical reasons, I don't want to just always give them my guy. How does that work? What would you recommend to make sure that it still is your client's decision and their best interest in mind?
Well, first of all, I have a conversation with them. And I tell them I have a list of 5 that I have thoroughly vetted. I'm also going to give you the link that you can go to Trek and look at every inspector that's licensed in the state of Texas. These 5, I know who they are. If the higher, in other words, number 1 is who I consider the best. Number 5 is maybe not as experienced as number one, but they're all solid inspectors. Right. You can hire anybody you want. Here's one of my pet peeves. We're supposed to find our clients the best lender, the best title company, the best home warranty, but a lot of brokers will say, oh, don't ever recommend an inspector because we could get sued. I got news for you. I've been a part of litigation, both as an expert witness and as a witness. And when they sue everybody. Anybody who's touched the property, looked at it wrong, they're all getting pulled in, right? That's what attorneys do. They bring everybody in and see who's got the better insurance, basically. So you recommending somebody, I would never say hire just this guy. I've never done that. My brother-in-law is a home inspector. He's the one who got me into the business 12 years ago. Awesome. We do not recommend him. He did not go on our list because we never want a conflict of interest. Right. Now, that being said, when I was just an inspector, not a realtor, I had a realtor here in San Antonio who, to this day, is in the top 10 citywide. She sells, 100, 150 houses a year. She not only would recommend me, she would set the appointment. Sometimes she would pay me. Now, did she take some risk? Absolutely. But in the back of my mind, I always knew she had such faith and confidence in me, I would never, ever do anything to jeopardize her license or her reputation or me, for that matter. So I wouldn't do that. She still does it, right? She doesn't use me. She uses somebody else now. But a list of 5. And if you're a new agent and you don't have a good list, go to an experienced agent in your office, and we have it set up in districts. Go to your DD, your district director, and say, hey, I need some help with inspectors. And they'll help you. They know who's good and who isn't. Right. Ultimately, it's the client's choice. Never challenge that, because then you are setting yourself and Fathom up for a lawsuit if something goes south. Right. But have a good list.
So having a good inspector also is a great insurance against litigations and issues down the road as well. So I appreciate the insight on that. Now, I kind of want to shift gears a little bit and talk about representing the seller. It seems like there's a lot of things from our conversation that could end up on an inspection that never should have ended up on the inspection with a little bit of forethought. What kind of things can you advise your seller to do to get ready for an inspection to make sure this is a very clean inspection?
Yeah, that's a great question. Here's what I tell agents and brokers. Even before I became a part of the Fathom family, I've done a lot of these for different brokers as an inspector. And what I always tell them is this: give your seller a preparation list. You want to give them a list of things that the honey-do list. Now, some of these may be outside the ability or the confidence of the homeowner, but they can get a good handyman to do a lot of these things. You want me to kind of run the list here?
If you got it, maybe your top ones at least, yeah. And this is also part of the document. I think the second document in there as well, right? On the page, so. Yeah. But yes. I'd like to hear what kind of are the common ones that you would see.
Absolutely. Now, as a realtor, you need to remind your clients, get all the cars out of the garage. I mean, that sounds silly, but I can't tell you how many inspections I've been on that the car in the garage and the people are gone, right? Now I can't pull the attic ladder down, or I can't get to a sub panel, or I can't get to the water, or whatever it may be, because I'm not scratching or damaging that car. Right. So now you're going to have to pay me to come back and re-inspect, or I'm going to have to put not inspected, not accessible, whatever it might be. The other thing is make sure all the utilities are on in vacant homes. That happens a lot. If the gas is off, we can't, and it's a gas, water heater, furnace, stove, we can't check it. Right. Stuff like that. Make sure the attic ladder or the attic access is accessible. Make sure your main panel and your sub panel. Main panel is usually on the outside of the house. They're not a problem, but even they can have bushes around them to where the inspector can't get to it, or there's a bee nest or something like that. They're not gonna damage the property to try to get to it. Right. Sub panel usually in the garage. There again, make sure they're accessible. A lot of times people pack boxes because they're moving, they're selling their home, right? It's under contract, and they've already started decluttering the inside and piling stuff in the garage. And now you can't get to the GFCI reset in the garage or the sub panel or the water heater or the water softener, whatever it might be. Make sure your air filter on your AC is clean. If you have pets, man, I've had some stories on pets running out the door. No, they weren't crated. They weren't put in a dog run. Make sure they're handled. Make sure the water heater is accessible. A lot of times people in extra bathrooms will store extra boxes in the tub or the shower. Can't check it. Make sure all that stuff's out. Make sure all your light bulbs are functioning. I mean, this is so simple, right? Because if the light bulb's out, we can't say it's just a light bulb. We have to say the fixture's not functioning as intended.
Right. Which could turn into...
That just raises a red flag for absolutely no reason, right? 9 times out of 10, it's a light bulb. Make sure all your smoke detectors have fresh batteries. Test them. And you can look at the back of them. They all have a date on them. They're only good for 10 years. Okay? Replace them. They're $10, $15 a piece. Make sure all your closets, garages, and attics have safety covers over the light bulbs. These are things you don't want on the report. You want this report clean. Right. You don't want to hand your negotiating power to the buyer because there's 20 pages of ridiculous things that they had to put on there, but it's leverage for the buyer.
Right.
We want to take the leverage away for the seller. Make sure all your exterior hose bibs have what's called an atmospheric vacuum breaker. It costs $5 at Home Depot or Lowe's. It's that little thing it's a little brass thing that spins onto the hose bib that when you turn the water off and it's under pressure, like on a hose with a sprayer, it'll water everywhere. That's what that is.
Right.
Make sure they have those. Make sure all your exterior wood trim, transitions, light fixture bases, electric panels are all sealed on the top with caulk so water can't penetrate. Remember this, anything that goes through the house electrically or plumbing, soak in insects and water. Seal it. Pretty simple. On your AC, on your condenser outside, make sure the big copper line, the little copper line means nothing. Disregard it. The big one, the fat one, has to be insulated well. That Freon's coming out of there at 40 degrees. You want to keep it cold. Make sure your primary condensation line for your AC, if it drains outside next to the house, it's 5 feet away from the foundation. Make sure you have at least a 12-inch air gap between shrubs and bushes against your walls. That's a termite highway. Make sure all your trees are 5 feet off the roof. Keep squirrels, rats, mice off your roof.
Now I'm going to need to go around my house and check all this stuff here.
Yeah, you got the list, brother. Now, here's one that a lot of realtors get all cringy about, and they're just, disclosure. Call your insurance company and say, I would like an adjuster to come out and look at my roof. Find out if there's a problem before you get it under contract. And just a little tip that I always tell all my clients, when you're buying fire casualty home insurance, always get a replacement plan. Because as the roof ages, every year it ages, it depreciates. So I have a client right now, she's fixing to have to spend $8,500. It's a small house on a new roof because she got the cheapest plan she could. And she regrets it now. No replacement cost. So after depreciation and after deductible, she's getting nothing.
She's covering the whole bill.
Not a penny. Exactly. So it's a free for your adjuster to come out and look at your roof. You may have had hail damage, you don't even know it. You may have had wind damage, you don't even know it. The other is, this happens a lot, broken outlets and switches in your house. Replace them. A handyman can do it if you're not confident handling that light electrical work. You do those things. The one I would add as well is I always tell my clients, let's have a fresh service invoice on the HVAC. Because if I'm a buyer's agent, I'm going to ask for it in a repair amendment. Because the reason I want that is HVAC companies are awesome at writing everything that's wrong down on there so they can get more work. So if you have that, you know exactly what's wrong with the system. Right? Now, some people will say, well, yeah, but now I'm exposing myself to a repair. you get a good home inspector, you're going to be exposed to a
It
repair
doesn't matter. You're going to
regardless.
be there anyways. Right. Right. Somebody asked, Deb Gartner, she asked, what are your thoughts in doing pre-inspections on listing? And that's actually my next question here. So thank you, Deb,
Yeah,
for,
yeah,
for helping us with that segue.
yeah.
Is it something that you recommend, or does it depend on different factors?
Depends on the age of the home, condition of the home. A newer home, we do a lot of military. I mean, I'm a veteran. I'm a veteran advocate. I love serving veterans and active duty. So because we do a lot of those, I don't recommend them a lot on military because they usually only been in a house 3 years if it's a new house. I would not waste the money on that, right? I might walk around it with them and look, realtors with this list can go do this exact same thing. I'm very clear with my clients. Right now, I'm your realtor. I'm not your home inspector.
Right.
But as a realtor, as a general contractor, I know these things. They're inherent, or they're part of my psyche. So let's walk around the house, and with blue tape, I mark things. Right.
Right.
If it's an older house, absolutely. Look, it goes back to disclosure, and it goes back to controlling the deal, controlling the negotiation. And if you have that pre-listing inspection, and don't do it unless you're going to fix the things, number one. If you're willing to fix them, that report, a lot of times people won't even get a buyer's inspection if it's fresh. If it's within the last 90 days and the agent recognizes this is a good inspector, they're going to be like, we don't need to waste your money. I mean, and you control that negotiating power. And look, disclosures, I read 90-something% of all lawsuits in real estate are based around disclosure, lack of. So let's just disclose everything, fix what we can fix, negotiate the rest.
Right.
So absolutely, Deb, I would get one. If it's an older house. If it's a new house, probably not, because it's still under a lot of warranty and whatnot, but it just depends on the situation.
I appreciate your advice there on disclosures. We were in a situation ourselves where we had previously had drain issues, and it was a question of, well, we fixed it. Do we disclose that we fixed it and it was an issue? And the reality is that most people, at least from what we've seen, is that if they want the house, they're going to get the house. No matter what you disclose, unless it's like this thing is literally falling apart. So they're disclosing it just gets you off the hook of any future issues, and they're probably going to move forward with it anyways, and maybe it turns into negotiations, maybe it doesn't, and you can always say no to the work that they're asking you to do, but I appreciate that. Now you've mentioned,
Can I bring up?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I bring up one other thing while we're on that subject matter? A lot of agents are nervous to do this, and I'm telling you, you can get so much information out of the neighbors on the buyer's side. Oh, they will tell. Oh, did they tell you that the back patio floods? Oh, did they tell you that a lightning strike? Oh, did they? You know what I mean?
Right.
And then you go look at the seller's disclosure. Go, whoa, wait a minute. They didn't mention any of these things or that major item. Knock on the neighbor's door for a lot of reasons, not only about the house, but about the neighborhood. What's it like on weekends? What's it like on holidays? Is the street full of cars at night because the driveways are so short? There's nowhere to park. All that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I would just want to remind that about the condition of the home, potential repairs that have been done, the neighbors. Look, we're all nosy neighbors. Let's just be honest with each other, right? My neighbor somebody comes across the street and asks me about the neighbor. I'll tell them all about their house, right?
Especially for those of us who work from home, because you're always monitoring what's happening in the neighborhood.
Yes. Exactly.
So one of the things you mentioned earlier, and I appreciate that pro tip as well about asking the neighbors. You already said that inspections are not exhaustive, and they're not designed necessarily for you to make a full evaluation on the value or the ongoing upkeep and that kind of thing of a home. What are some things, beyond just your standard inspection that realtors could help their clients with in being aware of, such as, somebody has a pool, and are there things that I need to know about maintaining a pool, that sort of thing?
Sure. So we're kind of getting into that cost of ownership a little bit category as well. Let's talk about swimming pools for a second. Swimming pools are, there's no straight line answer on this. Swimming pools depend on age, type of equipment. Is it heated? Is it salt water? Is it fiberglass? Is it gunite? There's all these different factors. I will tell you this. If you're gonna buy a swimming pool, whether a house has an existing swimming pool or you're gonna add one to your existing property, understand, don't buy it as an investment, because it's not. I know we're kind of getting out of inspections more into real estate.
Sure.
But it's a personal thing. It's kind of like TVs. We don't have a fancy TV. We have a 50-inch, and we feel so inadequate when we go to other people's houses, but it does the job for us. But we're not big into TVs, right? So a swimming pool is going to be a expense. You have to keep it clean. You have to maintain the equipment. There's a liability in regards to safety. A kid, down the street climbs a fence and gets in your pool and drowns. As tragic as that is, to humanity, to that child and that family, you're going to get sued. I'm not a big fan of them. Honestly, I'm a fan of above ground pools, because when you go to sell the house, we literally showed a house just a few weeks ago. They loved the house. They were an older, retiring, empty nest couple. They did not want a swimming pool. The swimming pool kept them from making an offer on the house. Now, right. The next family that come along, that might have been an attribute. Right. But for my clients, it was not. You're going to spend some money. You're going to have to maintain it. So I would be really careful on that. As far as cost of living goes, you have to think about insulation. You have to think about what kind of windows do I have, what kind of doors, what kind of roof do I have. Those things all require maintenance, or they cost you more in energy bills than maybe a newer house would, that type of thing. Right. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. No, just things that, you're buying this house and now you got to take care of it. And that's not something that the home inspector is going to give you necessarily going to give you some advice on. They're going to tell you everything that's wrong with the house, that you might want to negotiate with. But yeah, just, any other expenses that, the HVAC system, the roof, gutters, windows, that kind of thing, that maybe you would want your clients to know about.
Yeah. Yeah, that cost of ownership is a big deal. The older the house, generally speaking, the more it's going to cost you in energy, and the more maintenance you're going to have to do on the house. I would always tell people, look at the roof, look at the windows, look at the doors, look at the foundation. How old is the HVAC system? Like, I'll give you an example. 70% of the HVAC air conditioning systems in America have R22 refrigerant. R22 is 10 times more expensive than R410A, the newer refrigerant. So when you're buying, let's say, a 4,000 square foot house that has 2 or 3 split systems, you're talking about a lot of money to replace them if they're older systems.
Right.
I have that on right now. We have a house built in the 90s, 4,000 square foot, has 3 old R22 systems. People are looking at it going, I'm going to spend $25,000 changing all these out.
Right, and that goes back to your investment issue that, this is not, that now that your investments become not an investment, it's become an expense.
Exactly. And that also, if you do buy a house with older components like HVAC and stuff, it's that much more important to get that spring and fall service, because they're cleaning the coil, they're blowing out the condensation lines, they're checking refrigerant levels, they're doing all the things that need to be done to get maximum life out of the system. Yeah, absolutely. As a realtor, you should be able to walk around and recognize the difference between an aluminum window and a vinyl window. Double pane, single pane. This is not complicated things. You should be able to learn to read the label. You take a picture of the label with your iPhone or whatever phone you have, go back to the computer that night, you type it in, the serial number, the model number, it'll tell you exactly when it was built and where it was built. It's that simple. Yeah. It's not complicated. Now, that's kind of stretching it a little bit. I do that. Maybe not all realtors want to do that. I train other realtors to do it that way. They're offering a better service to their clients.
Well, and it goes to that too. And we've had others on the show before talking about, whatever your niche is. One of those things could be that you've really done your homework understanding the expenses or the issues, the home maintenance issues with a home. And now you walk in and you're able to give advice, and that gives your buyer more confidence in your ability to be able to show them issues or to be able to make a determination on the home. So I think it's great advice. This might be out of the purview of our topic here, but because I only had a chance to glance at it here. Brandon asks, he said, we bought a house last year. 3 weeks after we bought the house, we had to have the main sewer line replaced because of the tree roots that were in there. It was a $3,000 expense. They were 99% filled with roots, but he said there's no way that the previous homeowners would have known about the issues, but they didn't state anything in the seller's disclosure. He said, we've dealt with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Well, was it Brandon?
Yes.
That was the name.
Yeah, Brandon.
Brandon, honestly, good home inspector would recognize the location of that sewer line and recognize that the location of the tree and would say, I'm not saying you need to do this, but I would recommend you come out and get a camera inspection of that sewer line.
Right.
It would have cost you $150. And then you would have been able to go back to the seller and say, the sewer line is collapsing or is being completely clogged by tree roots. The very common thing.
Right.
That sewer line is 1/8 of an inch thick. It's the thinnest drain line PVC you can find. Doesn't take a lot to penetrate it. So there again is a realtor. Especially if you have an inspector that your client's hired that you don't feel confident after watching in them and listening to them, be a craftsman. Know what you're doing and recognize that sewer line's close to a tree. Tree roots, like a lot of people think when a tree root goes under a house, that it's heaving the foundation. That actually is very rare. What they're really doing is underneath all that concrete is caliche or gravel, and it has moisture in it. It stabilizes the concrete. It's sucking that moisture out, and then it just the opposite. It doesn't heave it. It collapses. Right? Mm-hmm. So tree roots are constantly looking for moisture. Earlier I said keep your tree limbs and branches 5 feet away from your roof, 5 feet away from the house. One of the reasons we know that is Texas A&M Agriculture Department came out a few years ago and said, we know that tree roots in most species of trees, I kind of got my hands up here, stop at the drip line of the tree canopy. So wherever that water drips off at the furthest point of the tree roots in most species stop there. So if you keep your trees trimmed away from the house, guess what?
The roots won't go.
The roots don't capture the water. They go where the water's dripping. So it's pretty common sense stuff. But a lot of inspectors may not tell you that. The good ones will tell you why. When they put that report together, they will tell you why you don't want to do this or you need to do this. That's what you're looking for.
If you don't mind, let's talk about reports and then about negotiations. And this is just from personal experience as well. We haven't bought and sold a lot of houses, but I thought this was kind of an interesting contrast. So our first home that we bought we intended to buy a fixer-upper. It was really cheap and had a lot, needed a full makeover. But we had an inspector come in, and it was an as-is home. And by the time he got done, I think he had been there maybe 25 minutes, and we had a single-page report. that was it. Maybe 2 pages. The one I think just had general information, and the second one actually had any thing in the house. And then later we got an inspector for a house we were looking to buy, and it was 40 pages with pictures and notes and arrows and all kinds of stuff on it. When an inspector produces a very long and perhaps, like you've kind of alluded to earlier, an excessively long report, what advice do you have for both buyers and sellers when it comes to negotiations? Because, like you said, there could be things in there that are like that's not an issue, or like the arc fault thing and or whatever. But any advice just on negotiating around the inspection report?
Well, I'm going to answer that.
I know
question.
that's kind of a multifaceted question. So
right. Reports can be very misleading. Don't judge the book by its cover. All right. So I kind of alluded to this earlier. My reports were pretty big. The reason is I took big pictures. I took a lot of pictures so people know exactly what I'm talking about, and I put a lot of maintenance stuff in the back. A lot of inspectors do that. So if you get the email link and it says 45 pages, don't freak out. You don't know yet, right? It could be a lot of maintenance stuff. The pictures
Right.
could be large. As far as getting the report and it's extensive, if it's nitpicky, as the realtor, keep your head about yourself. Don't get emotionally involved. You have to be detached. Now, I say that when I get in, we have an office in our house I'm in right now. When I'm in here, I get attached, right? But when I'm with my clients, I try to be very detached. Oh,
Right.
well, that's okay. Let's work through it. Let me get home and look. Because people call and they'll be panicky. Like, it's 47 pages, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
Calm down. Let me look through it. And then we'll call the inspector and ask you questions. So I think the biggest thing is be willing to call this guy or girl, because there's some good women inspectors as well, and say, could you please clarify this? Right? Even though I know a lot and I'm a licensed professional inspector, I'm not going to assume to know what he wrote. I'm going to ask if it's not clearly identified and is it a real issue? And if it's written well, I'll know if it's a real issue. If it's kind of cloudy, I'm going to call and ask, hey, give me some clarification here. So the biggest thing is be calm and cool. If you panic as a real estate agent professional, your client's going to panic, right? And they may just pull the plug and opt out. At least in Texas, we have opt out. So that's what I would say there. It is what it is. If you get a house that has more deficiencies than you expected, put numbers to everything. There again, another reason to have a little longer option period or due diligence period. Have enough margin there to be able to call a foundation company or electrician or a plumber or whatever the discipline is that needs to be further evaluated and see what it actually costs. Sometimes things are not as bad as they appear, right? When you actually get numbers. There again, if you're a real estate professional and you're going to be an expert at your craft, you're going to learn more and more about the cost of things, the processes involved in repairs and maintenance and stuff like that, so you can better counsel and advise your clients.
Greg asks, do you see a lot of boilerplate responses on reports? I don't know if it would be boilerplate, but okay, go ahead.
Yeah, well, part of this has to do with real estate agents, quite honestly. They have forced agents in some cases, in some markets especially, to put basically a CYA comment, cover yourself comment, right? Because if I don't, like, let me give you an example. Maybe I opened up the plenum on an HVAC, on an air conditioning air handler, and I take a picture of the evaporator coil. It is clean, but I see some rust on the edges, right? Which is a common thing, by the way. But if I'm dealing with a realtor that I know will throw me under the bus in a moment, you know what I'm going to do? Inspector recommends further evaluations by a licensed, reputable HVAC company.
Right.
Now, if I'm dealing with a realtor that I know is reasonable and is going to explain to their client and not explain, but, calm their client and say, hey, if you're really worried about it, let's get it further evaluated. I'm not going to put that.
Right.
So what's happened is inspectors have become weary of being threatened and talked down about. So they're putting that disclosure further evaluated on everything. Now, the inspectors I deal with don't do that, or they wouldn't be on my list, because that creates a negative environment when you see that on every major system, right? Further evaluation required. I had a situation probably about 8 years ago where I had done a lot of inspections for this realtor, and she was on the third house with a particular client. And I had done the first two inspections, found some major issues. They moved on. They kept opting out, find another house. On the third one, this particular HVAC system, I couldn't access the coil. It was a sealed system. So if a system is sealed, you unless you're a licensed mechanical contractor or HVAC, you can't open it. Okay, it's illegal. So, but I knew there were pets in the house. There's a lot of dogs and stuff. So I put in the report. System has great temperature differential. Everything looks great. However, there is a lot of animal hair. I don't see it in the ductwork from the registers or anything like that. So they closed on the house. They moved in, found out there was a lot of dog hair in the ductwork away from the registers. She wanted me to replace it all. I said, no. I told you. And in fact, I did say, recommend further evaluation because of the amount of dog hair. And because I can't access the coil, I don't know what it looks like.
Right.
And I said, I told you need to do this. She goes, no, my realtor said you put that in every report. I said, no, ma'am. So she threatened to sue me. I said, do what you need to do. She filed a complaint with Trek. Trek contacted me. I filled out the form, sent them the report, and I sent them my last 100 inspections. The lady calls me from Trek, goes, Mr. Campbell, appreciate your thoroughness. We don't need 100 reports. I said, but I want you to see I don't put it in every report.
Right.
I don't do that. Well, come to find out, she had the realtor had basically lied and threw me under the bus. So for a few reports after that, or actually for about a year after that, I was very nervous.
Right.
Because, don't be that realtor. Be a professional. Have some integrity and honesty, and don't tell clients things that probably aren't true.
Right.
So I'm telling you that because that's why you're seeing a lot of this boilerplate stuff.
Right.
They're protecting themselves.
Well, great question, Greg. Thank you for throwing that out there.
Yes.
Krista asks, do you have suggestions for how to deal with buyers who think that everything even mentioned on the inspection report must be fixed by the seller?
Yeah, Krista, it's called set expectations. Honestly, you have got to. Hey, look, I have this happen too. It happens to me as well, and I try really hard to set expectations with my clients. I mean, I tell them in person, I tell them on the phone, I tell them in text messages, I tell them in emails before the inspection. Here's what we're going to probably have happen. Set the expectations. Right. There's people that are unreasonable. There's nothing you can do about that. I mean, you just have to navigate through it and again, be the calm one, kind of pull away from the situation and be the one who is the person of reason and tell them that's, be honest with them. That is a false expectation.
And you want to do that before the inspection comes out. That way it doesn't look like you're like, you're covering something up. You want to say, look, there's going to be things, if I'm understanding you correctly, there's going to be things on inspection like, a clogged sink drain or something like that isn't a big fix. Just to understand that there's going to be a lot of that kind of stuff on there, that you may not want to bother your seller with. That kind of thing, or what would that sound like?
Absolutely. No, absolutely. It's got to be before the inspection. You got to be having that communication, setting those expectations before that. And I will, just as a side note, I know that JR is a big fan of this as well. I do not, as a buyer's agent, I do not like having sellers fix things after the inspection. Unless it's a lender-required repair. Get the money, do it yourself. It's human nature to do it as cheap and as fast as you can when you're going out the door, right? So that's something to pass along, especially for new agents.
So negotiate the cash rather than the fix.
Unless it's a lender required, then it's a different story. Or it's a roof and you can't get that much cash and make the deal happen, right? Because there's just not enough room for it. That's a different story. But even on roofs, if there's room in there for you to get the cash and you do the roof, do it, because you get what you want the way you want with the contractor you want.
Very good. That's all the comments or questions we have. Unless any pop in here at the end here. Any last words on working with your inspector?
Yeah, I would just say this. I kind of live by the golden rule. Treat people the way you want to be treated. Treat inspector the way you would want to be treated if you're an inspector. Because look, they can, like every industry, every profession, there's good and bad, right? I mean, that's just the reality of life. If you find a good one, you know, treat them with respect you know, kind of honor what they do, because it's a hard job. I mean, I'm gonna tell you straight up. It's, you know, I think I told you this earlier. You know, I took all my real estate classes and passed the test in a month. It took me a year to get an inspector's license. So it's a big, you know, it's a hard thing to do. That being said, I love real estate and I'm a realtor. I don't practice inspections since the past year or so, but you know, build relationships, build a good referral list, keep it maintained. I've had guys fall off mine. I've had people I've added. I've had people move down the line because they did something or said something, and then when I kind of confronted them on it and said, hey, you know, why'd you say that like that? And they got defensive. Okay, you just went from number 2 to number 5. You're still a good inspector, but you're not going to be my number 1
Not
or
the
2.
people you want to introduce your clients to, as quickly.
Exactly. You know, when I hand them my list or I email them my list, I say, you know, number 1 through 5, 1 being the best, 5 being just a little bit less experienced or whatever, you know? So yeah, that's just, go to the inspections, my friends. Do not let your home inspector control your deal, and don't let them change the expectations that you've set for your client. So be there.
Well, Keith, I really, really appreciate you coming on the show. I appreciate you getting into a lot of details on this. Again, if you'd like, if you're watching, go ahead and go to the show page there on our Fathom Careers site. You can find the live show navigation, I think, down in the footer area, and go to the show and get those 2 documents downloaded. It'll help you out a lot. But thank you so much, Keith. Really appreciate your input and advice.
My pleasure. And anybody that wants to call me has a question, especially newer agents, even an older agent, more experienced than I am. I've told you this, Jeff, I love learning and I love teaching. So my cell phone number, is it all right if I give it out?
Sure, why not?
830-837-1071. You have a question about something, you have a report you want me to look at, I'll look at it and give you my honest opinion. If you're concerned that, hey, is this a problem, I'll take the email and I'll look at it and I'll give you an answer.
Well, I appreciate
it.
And they can also, actually, I want to mention this too. If you just Google Keith Campbell Inspector, and Keith is with Fathom Realty, as he's been sporting his Fathom T-shirt. So we say on the show, the show's for all agents, but of course here. But Keith does a podcast. Do you want to say a quick word about that?
Yeah, it's fairly new. It's called The Inspecting Realtor. It's on all the platforms.
Now you got to keep it going because we're mentioning it here on the show.
Yeah, I'm fixing to have some really cool guests on there. I will tell you that. Having having a lender who's a VA expert, actually a team that are incredible. I've done a lot of loans with them, and just great guys. We're going to talk about loans. I talk a little bit in some of my previous episodes, but got some other guests. I've got some investors coming on. They're going to talk about investing in single family, multifamily, commercial as an investor. We're going to cover all kinds of topics. But yeah, you go to our website and connect with us, keithandsheila.com, and anything we can do to help you, we will do it.
keithandsheila.com.
We believe in serving. Yeah, that's why we love Fathom. All right, I know it's not just Fathom agents, but Fathom, the servanthood attitude is what sold us and has kept us. So we love that.
Well, that's a good word to close on, and we'll wrap things up. So thank you so much.
All right, Jeff, take care.
As always, if you're thinking about making a switch, it's a great time to do it. It's a growing company, and it's a company that serves you rather than you working for the company. We offer things like truly affordable healthcare, stock with every closing. We offer KV Core's CRM system and social media, marketing, all kinds of stuff here at Fathom. And we have another guest coming on next week, Sean Varon with Parkmont Lending. And you're kind of hearing this sort of repeat theme again and again about developing relationships with the different people on your your team of experts, whether that's your inspector or your title company, or your lender. So Sean's going to talk a little bit about that. He's an executive vice president at Parkmont Lending. He's done a lot of entrepreneurial things throughout his 23 years of experience. He's focused on mortgages, real estate, and even restaurants. So he just has a lot of overall business experience, including being a realtor himself. But having done the mortgage business for the last 15 years, 10 years as an originator, again, had his own real estate company for 7 years. So I know Sean has a lot of advice to give, so I encourage you to tune in next week for our interview with Sean Varon. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next week at 1:30.